final town hall so far of this portion of the town hall. So we appreciate you all being with us. First things first, we're going to lay some of the ground rules, and I'll give you just let you know what you can expect from this town hall today. So Chief is going to say a few words, followed by Commander Wally. He's going to give a presentation just talking about some of the key initiatives and strategies that IMPD North is using. And then it comes time for you, our residents, to ask questions. So questions, concerns, comments, we want to hear it all. And this town hall is really about you and our community. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Randall Taylor. Chief.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us for this town hall. I know there's plenty of other things that you could be doing, but I appreciate what you're doing here, because it certainly tells not only myself but our staff that you care about what's going on, especially in North District. I will tell you, I will keep my comments brief, mainly to the fact that we try to do our best to keep stats on a number of different things, and I'm sure Commander Wally will probably share some of those stats with you. The one stat I'll share with you is to date, murders in Indianapolis are down. This time last year we were at 60. Today we're at 48. It's about a 20% decrease. That's always a good thing. You'll probably hear or may hear that crime as a whole is down in Indianapolis, which is, again, is always a good thing. But just to reassure you that the men and women of the IMPD have your best interest at heart. They are out there working hard day and night, and they'll continue to do so. But after this, or after you've been told what's going on in North District, I hope that you will indeed share with us, either through the chat, primarily through the chat, what you think of these town halls. What is North District doing right? What are things you'd like to see improve, and what are your concerns? But as your chief, I am pleased to turn it over to Commander Mike Wally.
Thanks, Chief. I am Commander Mike Wally. I've been in this role since 2018. It has been an absolute honor to serve with amazing men and women of IMPD North District as we provide police services to you, the citizens of this great district. You know, growing up on this district, I never dreamed that I would have the opportunity to serve in this capacity. It has been an absolute pleasure, and it's certainly a responsibility that I don't take lightly. I'd like to first acknowledge the city county councilors who are on the call with us today. Thank you for joining us. Chief and his executive staff that is also on the call with us today will probably chiming in with some responses to some of the questions. And then most importantly, the community that is here with us today. I'm going to get through this presentation as quickly as possible. I have a lot of information to share. Did that just zoom that in? I've got a lot of information to share with you, so I will do my best to get through it as quickly as possible. So first and foremost, I'm a pictures guy. I like you to see the officers that are serving your community, so you're going to see several photographs throughout this presentation. It's just my way of letting you see the hardworking men and women of this agency, but then also how we connect with the community. This particular photograph is from our last Coffee with a Cop event at the Steak and Shake at 5300 Keystone. We partnered with that Steak and Shake, but then also Mr. Anthony Beverly with Stop the Violence. We had some programming there where we were able to sit down and have several different conversations with the community that showed up in a lot of numbers. So we were excited about that event. This is just a small group that was there with us that evening. So our agenda for tonight, that was my introduction. I'm going to go and do an overview of North District. We're going to talk about some previous crime trends from 2021, and then we'll talk about where we're at right now. We're going to discuss briefly some of the challenges that we face as a district. And then we're going to talk about our North District philosophy, along with the strategy that we will deploy. The next two things that I want to really hone in and highlight would be the problem-oriented policing which was deployed last year, along with the ECSI, or the Enhanced Community Safety Initiative. Show you one example of how those are working to keep our community safe and how we're working together with the community. Then I'm going to provide you some contact information and some important dates of some community events that will be coming up here in the near future. And then lastly, we'll provide an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So let's go ahead and get started. This first slide is just North District headquarters. This is a picture of it. As you can see on the map to the left on your screen, we are positioned in the north, somewhat eastern portion of the district, or sorry, of the county. We provide police services to roughly 200 and probably 225,000 residents right now. This is actually saying 209, but this is 2010 census data. And I would argue that it probably expands a little bit more, given the number of retail spaces and businesses that occupy our boundaries, along with the major corporations. During the day, I would guess that number swells to probably 225,000 to 250,000 residents that are occupying our borders. We're roughly 71 square miles, and our officers see between 100 and 110,000 police runs a year. So in 2020, we had a transfer of boundaries, so we changed up the district a little bit. We went from 79 square miles to 71 square miles. The new boundaries, we picked up some of the previous East District's boundaries that are on the southern portion of our district, and then Northwest also took some of our district towards the northwestern region. And so now our current boundaries are 96th Street across the north. If you're on the west side of our district, right at Ditch Road, if you go straight south, so anything that is going to be west of Ditch Road or on the west side of Ditch Road will be under Commander Lewis and the Northwest team. We take that down to Grandview, continually go south, and we pop out on Michigan Road around 5200, 5300, and then we go straight south and follow the interstate all the way down to the outskirts of downtown, which is roughly 14th Street-ish. And then we jog right up Massachusetts to Emerson. And then anything that is going to be east of Emerson or on the east side of Emerson will be under Commander Rick Riddle and his Northeast team or East District team. And then we go straight north and follow Fall Creek in between Lawrence, and we expand back out to Geist. So 20 patrol beats within that region. We usually staff it from anywhere from 23 to 26 officers each shift. Our officers do a tremendous job responding to dispatch runs, but also being proactive and trying to engage the community as much as possible. Next is just a breakdown of our staffing. What you'll see in the photographs, this is our executive leadership team on the district. Our day shift captain, Captain Giese, is in command during the daytime hours. And then you have Captain Taylor, who is our late TAC captain, who's responsible for overnight command. And then our lieutenants, shift lieutenants, and also unit lieutenants. So the first lieutenant down at the bottom is Lieutenant Mike Crotty. He's to the left. He's responsible for our investigation staff. They see roughly 6,000 to 7,000 cases come through their office a year. They do a tremendous job investigating anything from some of our lesser violent crimes to retail thefts, retail crimes, and things of that nature. Then to his immediate right would be Lieutenant Scott. He is responsible for our neighborhood impact unit. So when we talk about the ECSI, a major component of that, or the Enhanced Community Safety Partnership Initiative, he is responsible for our community relations piece, which really focuses in on a lot of that problem-oriented policing, but also our violence reduction teams and violent reduction task force teams. Then you have our shift lieutenants. In the middle there is Mike Jefferson. Lieutenant Jefferson is in command of day shift. He is in command during the hours of 05:30 to 2 o'clock p.m. Next to him is Lieutenant Ryder, who has our middle shift. He is in command approximately 1:30 to 10 o'clock. And then our overnight lieutenant is Lieutenant Atkins, who is responsible for officers that are providing services between 9:30 and 10 o'clock p.m. As you can see, total staffing is 208 officers, and we have 6 civilian members of our team that do a phenomenal job for us. Total officers are 160 officers deployed throughout the various shifts in units, and then we have 17 detectives and 17 sergeants. So let's now talk about last year, kind of where we were as far as statistics, but then also what we did last year. So as we look at last year, overall crime on North District was up 5.3%. Our criminal homicides were up 25%. If you all recall, in January of last year, the city, the state suffered a devastating loss of 6 lives on Adams Street, which put the district roughly 600% of where we were up in homicide for the previous year. And we were trying to dig ourselves out of that for a long period of time. By the end of the year, we were up roughly 25% on our homicides. However, our robberies were down 23%. Aggravated assaults were down 23%. Burglaries continue to decline. It's been a trend that's been going on for a couple years now. They were down 10%. So let's talk about what we kind of deployed during the middle of the year last year. You've heard me reference it before. We implemented the Enhanced Community Safety Initiative. If you recall, we talked about this on the last virtual meeting where we were reallocating narcotics detectives to strictly focus on violent crime. We also added a proactive team at the time that was deployed during the peak hours of violence. And then we started hotspot policing, which has been around for a significant amount of time. I think it was roughly initially launched in 1988. Several agencies around the country have deployed hotspot policing. Of the studies that have been done, there have been 78 research studies done on hotspot policing, of which 62 of those studies indicated major reductions in violent crime. Now, the important piece of hotspot policing is the application of hotspot policing. And so what we found was that agencies that deployed a zero tolerance, meaning they locked everything up in sight, they saw a reduction in crime, but there was disparate impact to both Black and brown communities. That's not what we're doing. The application piece is probably one of the most in pieces with our hotspot policing. And so last time we were together on a virtual call, we discussed dosage, or our way of deploying resources into those hotspots and what they were going to be doing. Dosage is kind of like, it's similar to what we call the Cooper curve, which is a study that was done in Minneapolis, where it basically says that if you put an officer in a high crime area from anywhere to 10 to 15 minutes, you will see significant reductions in crime. Now you do that every couple hours, and studies have shown drops in crime. And so what we did was we utilized directed patrols, foot patrols, bike patrols, and roving roll calls. So if we look at the numbers that we did last year for those particular things, North District led the city with 9,569 foot patrols. We biked roughly 508 miles on the district. We spent 232 minutes doing directed patrols, and we had 9 roll calls a month during the year, 1 or 3 on each shift a month. So we really focused in on being visible to our community. I hope you guys saw the increased visibility, because that's one of the things that we truly focused on, and showing that we were out there and available to service you, our community. Then the other thing that we did, given COVID and how it kind of shut the world down, we slowly tried to open up and reignite our community relations efforts. You saw things return, such as Community Day, which we joined up with East District last year, and we had at the JTV Hill Center, which was located roughly around 1700 Andrew J. Brown. We did that in the fall. It was a great turnout. We did things like the pastors' use of force training, where we had local pastors from all over the place come in and learn about how we use force, and we put them through some scenarios and got some feedback from them. So that was another exciting event. We also did a couple roundtables, like robbery roundtables and apartment roundtables, for our community to get some information out there to alleviate crime. And then you saw the launch of problem-oriented policing, which really hones in on the environmental factors or characteristics in certain areas that could be contributing to violence. And so we have our CRU team that does a phenomenal job because they're out of the run queue and they're able to be in those meetings and have those discussions to identify those issues, but they work as the case agents. Now, that doesn't mean that our beat officers aren't ingrained or in problem-oriented policing. They also have shift-level projects that the lieutenants lead on each shift as well. So now let's talk about where we are at. Another photograph of more bike patrols, foot patrols, and then our late shift down in the bottom corner doing a roving roll call in one of our neighborhoods. But as far as the data goes, criminal homicides, this is as of today, so this is real-time data. Criminal homicides on the district are down 18%. You can see robberies are down 58%, aggravated assault down 66%, simple assaults down 42%. I'll let you look at this for a second, but all violent crime or violent crime totals are down 49.6% at the moment. And then we look at property crime, which is a crime category down for a little while now. You see the continuation of burglaries continue to fall with, we're now at 12%, larcenies 46%, and the other categories would ultimately lead us to a 38.9% reduction in property crimes. Now, crime totals as a whole in the district, we are doing a pretty good job. There's certainly room for improvement, but it's down 43.1%. So you guys saw this, if you joined us for the last virtual meeting that we had in, I think it was in April or May, you've seen this wheel before. As we really target violence and looking at reducing violence, we have to understand that there are other factors out there that could potentially be contributing to some of the violence that we're seeing. And so as we come up with violent suppression strategies, we must be cognizant and understand that we've got to address some of these outer issues to really hone in and make violence go down. And so how do we do that? We're really good at identifying people that need to be removed out of the community and putting them in jail. However, what we have done really well is also partner with our grassroots organizations around us. We have partnered obviously with the Office of Public Health and Safety and some of the initiatives that they are bringing and resources they are bringing as well. But we've also we've gotten with some of our local grassroots organizations like, for example, there was a community that had an uptick in domestic violence related incidents. We got with a group called Silent No More that really focuses on domestic violence, got them hooked in with the neighborhood association president, and we were able to pass out some information to them. So those are things that are going to be extremely important as we talk about mental health and addiction. We have things like MCAT that do a phenomenal job. We have an MCAT unit or two on North District, do a phenomenal job responding to real-time instances when community members are in crisis. In over 90% of their interactions, they don't result in an arrest. So they tend to get individuals in crisis or in need to the resources that they need. If you recall, those officers are paired up with a clinician that really dial in and get the individuals in crisis the resources that they need. Now you couple that with the launch of the AIC, or the Assessment Intervention Center, which is basically an alternative to jail. As officers go out in the community and they seek to tackle some of the issues that we're seeing, and we're confronted with situations where an arrest could be made. But as we start digging into it, we understand that maybe this is an addiction issue. We have an option now where we can take them to this center and get that person resources that they need for overall welfare and the being of that individual, which reduces violence in some cases in certain areas of the city. So now let's talk about what our philosophy is and the strategy which we are going to deploy. So we keep it simple on North District. We've got 3 pillars: impact violent crime, enhance community relationships, and personnel development. Everything that we do, every crime suppression strategy, every decision that we make, we should be looking at these 3 pillars and how we can make sure that, one, we are going to be impacting crime. How do we bring community stakeholders into the equation? How do we get them get their insight, get their wants, concerns, and desires, resources in some cases involved in whatever the crime suppression strategy is, and then how do we develop our officers to make sure that they are reaching their own goals and aspirations on this agency? Are we supplying them with details and opportunities for them to learn and grow, seeing other parts of this agency? And so that's a really important, those are our three pillars. Now, the strategy that we deploy is simple. We're still going to continue driving down on the data and hotspot policing. That's one way that we can really ensure that our officers in their appropriate places at the appropriate times. And then we're still focused on our enhanced community safety initiative and all the things that it brings to the table. We're still going to focus in on problem-oriented policing. I want to show you, and I will show you later, an example of problem-oriented policing that was done here recently. And then also, we're going to really get the ground running on our community engagement, because that's the important piece. That's how we build trust. That's how we build legitimacy and bring you into the equation and gain partners in this fight against violent crime. And then last but not final, our shift level or crime plans that are developed at the shift level. Crime is constant, constantly shifting. And so what we understand is some parts of the city are busier at some parts of the night, and some are busier during the daylight hours. And so our shift lieutenants must be able to track that and come up with plans to alleviate any issues or concerns from the community. So let's talk about how we do that. How do we get that information to our officers? How do we come up with our resources or where our resources should be deployed? What you see to the left of the screen is what we call a patrol plan. Basically, this is sent out to every officer prior to their shift. It contains information from the previous 24 hours about the things that are important for us to focus on, whether that's wanted persons or things that happened within their zones of responsibility, to ensure that they're in tune with what happened over the last 24 hours and they're up to speed on the people that we need to be targeting or going after, or in behaviors that we need to be going after. That's one way of driving. That's data. We actually have a 24-hour call a couple times a week with our boss, the Deputy Chief of Operations, where we discuss the previous 24 hours and come up with our plans for the day. Next, we've obviously got complaints from the community or emails that are sent in, or communications from community meetings. That's one way that we identify issues or concerns in the community. But one that I'd really like to highlight is last year towards the end of the year, and then again towards the beginning of this year, we deployed a survey. The purpose of this survey was, again, to focus on the concerns that the community has. And so we sent an email out with a link to a survey to all of the neighborhood association presidents that we have, and we asked some questions. And the purpose was just to really identify what concerns you and the community have in your neighborhoods. And some of the questions that we asked, do you have an active crime watch? Because that's important. Do you believe bike and foot patrols are effective? What are your current concerns in your community? What do you think IMPD can do to improve the quality of life in your neighborhood? So we're looking for quick wins or things that would be impactful in your community. Are police responsive to your needs? Have you attended a North District Task Force meeting? To date, we've received roughly 145 responses back. I have looked through every last response. There are some similarities across the board with things like traffic, but there are some communities that have some other concerns. Some of them align with what our data is showing them. And I have this text box in the middle because I'm going to talk about this specific one in the middle that was impacting our community, or a segment of our community. But this is one way that the community can drive resources to their community. Let us know what your concerns are, and then our officers will try to come up with plans to alleviate some of those issues that you're seeing and some of those concerns. And so I've asked that survey link be added in the text box, so you have an opportunity to respond to that yourself and give us some feedback and information. So this is my CRU team, problem-oriented policing gurus. They are not in the run queue to the left of the screen. You can see some of the things that they are engaged in doing each and every day. But most importantly, they are tasked with coming up with solutions for some of the problems that you see in your community. Some of those are expressed through the community meetings that they attend, and they are the case agents for those issues and coming up with solutions. And so I wanted to highlight one of the problem-oriented types of incidents that we just recently partnered with. There were a lot of people involved with the resolution to this situation. There's a apartment complex located in the district where the residents inside of that community are a vulnerable community, and they were living in terrible living conditions. We started to see an uptick of runs and violent runs and shots fired and incidents that were occurring in this what we called a micro hotspot that wasn't necessarily there before. So it was on our radar, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. That was coupled by reports from beat officers talking about some of the houses that they entered into and some of the ways that the community, how they were living. There were a couple, as you can see, these are some of the runs that were in that area that weren't necessarily, they're not normally in that area. We saw arsons, and what we learned is there were some vacant apartments that were inhabited by some squatters. They were trying to stay warm, and so they were starting fires in some cases to stay warm, and ultimately some buildings were set on fire. And so we engaged in some of those conversations. There were several meetings that had occurred, and what we found out is that a lot of it was dealt with the ownership of the apartment complex, but we still pressed on. We deployed resources, walking patrols, foot patrols, directed patrols in that area. We had an officer that was assigned to going to those monthly meetings, coming up with solutions. We tried to get as many resources that we could in there, and we worked hard. And ultimately, what ended up happening is that community was purchased by another owner, and then we immediately made contact with that owner, worked together with them, and on the day that they took over possession of the property, we ended up having several of our officers detailed to that community to help go through 588 apartments to clear and make it safe so they could be prepared to be boarded. We had communication with some of the squatters that were residing in some of those homes. Obviously, we told them that they could no longer be there and they were trespassed, but that was also coupled with information from our homeless team. But then also we wanted to drive resources to them should they need those resources as well. Trespass agreements were signed so that we can operate when management was not there. There's my watch just talking. We we got trespass agreements on file so we can operate while the management wasn't there. We still got some work to do, but ultimately, since we have done that, built those relationships, we've gained some trust from the community. They are now calling in more often and reporting crimes. We just had a drug bust within that community a week or two after the new management got there, which ultimately lets us know that we had gained the trust of the community back. And we were working together to alleviate some of those issues. We're still going to be working in there, still partnering with the local churches, trying to provide food and resources in that community, but just a phenomenal job by our officers on that particular incident. So now we've also got the gun detectives in our Vert 1 and Vert teams, which are our proactive teams that are geared towards really focusing in on those people and places and behaviors that are driving the violence in our community. What we did with this team is we really started looking at our shots fired, really honing in and investigating them. And I'd like to go through an example of how this particular method is bringing those individuals that are haphazardly firing rounds at people, but also we are stopping violence from occurring in the future. So after on February 14th or February 10th, we had a shots fired incident at a location. Gun detectives were able to identify the suspect that was involved. The suspect was found to have several outstanding warrants, one of which were filed by our gun detectives for previous shots fired incidents. Detectives were able to pinpoint a location on our target using investigative tactics. The North District Gun Detectives conducted undercover surveillance with our VERT teams on the residence, and while they were there doing undercover surveillance, they noticed an altercation between our target and a vehicle that was outside. The vehicle quickly sped off as the undercover officers continued to watch the location, but then a few minutes later, we saw our target come out with several other individuals that had masks, bullet-resistant vests, and firearms. And it was obvious they were en route to go do something they shouldn't have been doing. And so that information was radioed into our VERT team. Our VERT team attempted a traffic stop on the vehicle. It ultimately fled. A short pursuit ensued, but then the occupants of the vehicle got out and fled. Officers were able to apprehend a couple of those individuals inside of that vehicle. We gathered enough information on scene, and we were able to piece together the other people that were inside of that vehicle. Ultimately, they were arrested a few days later, and we didn't stop there. Next, we, through investigative tactics, identified who the party that was involved in the altercation, found out that he had some warrants set up on him as well, did a traffic stop, and he also had some firearms and some narcotics on him. So our officers followed up on a shots fired incident that ultimately prevented a non-fatal shooting or possibly a homicide, at the very least, a shots fired incident by following up on and following the trail of evidence. So this group does a phenomenal job. You can see their stats to the left of the screen. This information, like I said, is not even a full year's worth of work, but they do a phenomenal job for us, and I'm really proud of this group. This is just photographs from that particular incident, just showing how what we do is a targeted approach. We're not just going out throwing a net at random people. We're not looking to stop everything that's moving. We're not looking to harass people that are going to and from work. It is a targeted, laser-like focused approach to stopping violence, and that's what you're getting from your North District team. So this last piece is part of the survey that was deployed. To the right, you'll see the actual letter that I sent out with our community partners. But I look at this, and this is what I call our satisfaction score at the moment for how visible we are in the community. We've got some room to improve. I certainly have some room to improve, but it's a start. We're going to continue to try and be as visible as possible so we can reduce violent crime within the community, but also making sure that we take the time to get to know the people that are in our community so that we can build trust and legitimacy. So there, at the point where I wanted to give you a few important dates of some upcoming events. This is just a couple of them. I know there's one that's not on here where we're going to be painting Easter eggs with a senior citizens group or a home here in the next couple of weeks, or next week actually. But these are just a couple of important dates. The July 7th one is a big one. That is our North District Community Day. Last year, like I said before, we had it at 17th and Andrew J. Brown. This year, we're going to have it in Castleton. We're actually going to have it on the property, and it'll be from 11 to 3 p.m. on July 17th. So please come and join us as we celebrate being together, working together, and celebrating our community together. So I have provided an overview of the district. We talked about the crime trends from last year and where we are now, and that we've still got some work to do, how we address the challenges that contribute to violence in some cases. We talked about our North District philosophy and the strategy which we will continue to deploy here this year. We talked a little bit about problem-oriented policing and gave you an understanding of what that looks like in some instances, and then how our ECSI strategy is, one, bringing people to justice who are firing shots within our community, but then also preventing crime or future crimes from occurring. Next, I would like to provide you some contact information. This is just about everyone that you would need to know in our district. A couple things that I did want to highlight down at the bottom would be your shift lieutenants. The first one, Mike Jefferson, on day shift. The second one is middle shift Lieutenant Rob Ryder. Late shift is Lieutenant Larry Atkins. These are going to be your guys that have operational control of the officers during the various hours of the evening or the day. You've got both captains. My email is also in here. But there's also a link on here, indy.gov, that will get you to a couple different things. One, which is our IMPD online reporting, IMPD Core, which is a platform that's utilized for self-reporting for instances such as failure to pay, theft of services, harassment, lost property, theft, vandalism. You can actually log in and do the reports yourself. The purpose, we want to keep our officers in service really honed in on reducing violence within your community and providing you adequate, quick service to get some of these needs taken care of. The last thing that I'll mention is the Crime Stoppers email address, telephone number. That is a mechanism in place where if you have information of crime that's occurring within your community and you don't necessarily want to be involved, there is an opportunity for you to report that crime anonymously. And there's no way that we as IMPD can figure out who reported or any of that. So that is 100% anonymous way of getting crime tips to your IMPD police department. So with that, that is the end of my presentation, and I will allow some opportunities for questions.
Okay, Commander, thank you so much for that interview and for doing that presentation. Right now, we're going to ask a few questions right now. I think that might be your wife on the line. Okay, just wanted to make sure everyone could hear me. We're having some audio issues. Okay, like we said, now that the commander's presentation is done, any questions, comments, concerns that you have, we also have the chief on the line, the assistant chief, and many other members of our command staff. Lots of questions or lots of comments right now about the commander. One of them coming in, this saying, can you discuss the police complaint process and its current status?
So you're talking about complaints that come in from complaints from the community regarding officers. I'm assuming that's what we're talking about. The one thing that I will say is anytime there's a member of our community that feels that they were treated unjustly or unfairly by any of our officers, I would say immediately contact a supervisor to the scene. That way a supervisor can get on scene and immediately start an investigation as to what has happened and if there were any policy violations. One of the things that you all are aware of, we do now have body cameras. And so that allows us an opportunity to see the interaction for the most part. Obviously, there will be some angles that we will not always be able to see, but it provides an avenue for us to at least to review what was said in most cases by both parties involved and come to an understanding if there was any policy violations. Secondarily, if you go to that indy.gov website, there's also information if you type into the search box, the Citizens Complaint Office. That's another opportunity where you can reach out directly to the Citizens Complaint Office and file a complaint with them. They will take over that process, and in most cases, those are investigated or via IA or sent back to the district for investigations.
Alexa, we lost you again.
The question was, when we say the word community, what area comes to mind? You know, I don't necessarily see community as a geographical thing. I see it as people working together. Obviously, when I say community, what I'm talking about is North District and its entirety, but that also expands to the city. So when I specifically say our North District community, the people that are residing within the boundaries of the North District and how we work together, I guess that's probably the easiest way of communicating.
We also have some comments in the chat about a biannual fundraiser, and that's at Chile Verde on May 14th. That's from 5 to 9. So 33%, excuse me, of the bill, that's going to be donated to support North District's Community Day, which the commander had mentioned. That's coming up in July. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be an awesome event. Some people asking how they should ask their questions. So all questions should be coming through the chat. Any questions, comments, it just was easier this way to get the commander those questions. Another resident, let's see, saying there seems to be a lot of street racing on the northwest side. Commander, can you talk a little bit about what's being done to control that?
So yeah, that's a common complaint. And as I looked at the surveys, that was probably the most discussed complaint. was the traffic in various, I mean, all over the district in our major thoroughfares like 38th Street, Benford, Meridian, in some cases, Broad Ripple. Some complained about the neighborhoods. That's a tough one. As we really focus on violent crimes, obviously we want our officers in hot spots really focused in on alleviating violence as a whole. But some of the things that we have done last year, we did deploy an overtime detail that was specific to 38th Street. Some was utilized on Meridian and then Benford Boulevard to really try and slow things down. I think if I remember correctly, last year in 2021, we saw 7 fatalities that all occurred on 38th Street, pretty much from Michigan out to the county line. And so we really stepped up our patrols, or at least our visibility within those sectors to try and slow things down. There are some challenges as we look at some of the behavior that's occurring. We've had a policy change here recently that somewhat restricts our ability and rightfully so, our ability to chase vehicles because we certainly don't want to contribute to some of the dangers. But we are actively trying to address that issue. In fact, we just had a discussion 2 weeks ago about how we were going to try and utilize some of the resources and overtime spending to address that issue again.
Thank you, Commander. Just going through some of the questions and comments here. Somebody was asking about the boundaries of North District. So I believe somebody responded in the chat with the map that shows kind of what's considered North District. Another person asking about maybe a group involved in home burglaries. Commander, can you talk to us a little bit about what goes into an investigation like that?
A group involved, like are we saying like we think that there's a group of individuals that are going from home to home, burglarizing, so kind of like a burglary ring?
That's what it seems like, yeah. So if
Okay.
you can just talk about what investigators do to look into something like that.
So without really going into investigative tactics, I think the most important thing would be to discuss with the homeowner about steps that they can take to make sure that they have the information available that will allow us to do a good, thorough investigation. The first piece of that will be some of the prevention mechanisms. Do you have cameras in place? Is everything locked? At night, do you keep your windows shut so that people can't see what's in your home, making it something that they want to go after? Are you leaving your driveway or your vehicle in your driveway with your garage door opener in it? Because if someone busts that window, they now have access to your house. So prevention is extremely important. Also, any of the major items that you have in your home, serial numbers are going to be extremely important because what we find is that a lot of the criminal element will take the items from your home and then go and try and pawn it. If we have those serial numbers, we're able to track that information. In order to pawn certain things, you have to provide some information to get that stuff pawned, and then we can work the trail backwards. So, I mean, those are the major things that I would say as far as prevention. Usually with our burglaries, if we have good suspect information, if there's an area that has been touched that is of a clear flat surface and we're able to pull prints, we'll pull prints to see if there's someone in the system with those prints. But the biggest thing is going to be prevention in those cases.
This one might be for the chief or Assistant Chief Bailey. Somebody's asking about the $9 million in ARPA funding that is going to IMPD to enhance technology, such as gunshot detection. Can one of you answer that or give some details on that?
Sure, I'll briefly summarize that. In the chat, I'm also putting a link to a video on YouTube that we put out last week that kind of also explains some of the technology and how we're purchasing it. But through the American Rescue Plan Act, the council and the mayor's office allocated $9 million for us to upgrade technology that includes public safety cameras, automatic license plate readers, and the testing of a gunshot detection system in a small portion of our city to see if this is something that works for us. And then needs funding beyond the 3 years of funding that's been allocated through the $9 million from the American Rescue Plan money. To date, we have, or soon this week, I think we're placing an order for around 120 ALPRs. We've continued to put up new cameras, replace old technology with new cameras, and then we're in the middle of a process that we have to go through as a government to identify vendors for the gunshot detection system. And so that is still a while down the road before we're able to put that up and test it and see how that works for us.
Thank you, sir.
There
Next,
was also a question or a comment in there about solvability on homicides, and I just wanted to tell everyone, our detectives do a fantastic job at investigating, but their job really is so much easier when people get involved. I think we have to acknowledge that homicides are indeed a police issue, but it's also a community issue. And for those who are willing, we ask for their help, their willingness to let us know what they see. It's very important as far as investigations go. Some of our investigations, I believe, can be solved a lot quicker if people that saw things would let us know about it. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand there's concerns for people's safety and those kind of things. I get it. But we need to make that effort as much as possible in order to get those solved quickly. We've had some great examples of community being involved. Things simple as a license plate on a vehicle or a type of vehicle or where a vehicle went have all gone into solving crimes at a quicker rate. So as much as you're comfortable with, as much as you're willing to be involved with, please, if you are seeing these types of things, please let us know.
Chief, while we have you here, and Chief Bailey, this is also another person asking about the other states using that technology. Can you respond to them about the technology that's being bought?
Other states, yes. I mean, the public safety cameras and license plate readers are not new technology. We've had both in our city before, just not to the scale we think that we need to help us solve crimes, as the chief was talking about, and as the question was in the chat. One of the things that our homicide detectives continually ask for is for more of the license plate reader cards, or cameras, and that's where we're trying to deploy those. So I know lots of technology in Chicago and New York and New Orleans and cities all across the country utilize this same technology. Washington, D.C.
Organized gangs. We are seeing an emergence of individuals that go from group to group and perpetrate crime. So I don't want to say that we have a gang problem, but we do have people or parts of the criminal element that shift from area to area and perpetrate violence. But again, that's why our ECSI is in place to really identify those individuals and get them off the street if they are not choosing to go with societal norms. That's the importance of understanding who they are and getting them off the street. Obviously, we'd like for them to utilize resources or turn their life around, but sometimes you have people that have just shown that they're not going to get with the program, and those are the ones that we have to go after, unfortunately, and remove from the community.
Thank you, sir. One question, I'm kind of going all over the place right now, but one question asking about how is North District interacting with OPHS and some of the Peacemakers? Commander, you want to take a shot at that, or Assistant Bailey, you want to, Assistant Chief?
So I can tell you that our SO has a weekly meeting with one of the directors to discuss how we can address some of the issues that we see on the district. We also have a mechanism in place where if during our review of the previous 24 hours we identify someone that would be good for OPHS to dig into and look into and provide resources or services to, we will get that information to the Office of Public Health and Safety. We don't necessarily, they are a separate entity, but we do our best to try and provide opportunities outside of arresting people to get them on the road to where they should be.
There's a
Thank you,
couple other
sir.
questions in there about the Peacekeeper Initiative, and I want to make sure everyone's clear. This is a separate, independent agency outside of IMPD that manages that entire process. But we work closely together because, as you saw in the commander's presentation, crime has many factors that contribute to it. All those things that were listed in there, and so being able to go after the issues related to crime from both those long-term systemic issues that we know exist that we need to fix, but also addressing the needs now to stop the violence in the communities is why we're engaged both with these offices. There's certain people in those groups that the police department will never have any interaction with, and that's done purposefully, and that's so that they can interact with people in the community and try to stop violence from occurring, retaliation, those type of things. And then there's others that we will engage with. And I know the commander has done in the past where he's communicated with the people that come to where those that are on probation, parole are brought in and given options and opportunities to not reoffend and to be productive members of society. We have that obligation to them as well. So it all works together. Hopefully to see this trend that we've seen both in homicides and non-fatal shootings since April of last year, still trending in the right direction. Now, obviously, we finished where we didn't want to finish last year, but the numbers were trending down from April 1st of last year, and we've seen that continue into this year. So we have to keep up the pressure and keep working together.
Thank you, sir. Commander, when you have a moment, some people are asking if you could reshare that screen with your contact information on it. So if you can go back to that while I'm going through some of these other questions.
Alexa, let me comment on one issue with juveniles. I certainly understand the frustration with juvenile crime. What happens, sometimes it does seem like a revolving door. Our officers get frustrated with a lot of that as well. You identify a juvenile, maybe you even catch them in the act, and it appears that sometimes they're back out there. That is more of a philosophical issue with juvenile and what the juvenile court feels is best for juveniles. And I understand where they're coming from. In the past, so I've been in this job for 33, almost 34 years, and I've seen the juvenile, different tactics done with juveniles. I think in the past, the concern was you arrest the juvenile and you put them with other juveniles that are behaving poorly in some type of detention, and they don't seem to get any better. They seem to learn from those other juveniles how to continue to act poorly or even worse. So I get it. There's attempts being made to try to limit the amount of time that they spend in a detention. My honest opinion on that is I'm not sure if that is the right direction or not. You know, as kids, we know kids make mistakes. The goal is to train them out of that. But I think it's met with varying degrees of success in some of that. But I certainly understand the frustration. Um, for as much as you're comfortable with, if you have the ability with your phone to get video of those acts going on as you're calling for our assistance, it would certainly be helpful in letting us know that you have that video. we can use that as evidence in court. It's ultimately up to the court what the punishment is going to be. But I think it's with a lot of different things. You get a kid that has done this more than once, you move to the next step in an effort to try to get them help. So hopefully that answered it. Probably not exactly the answer you're looking for, but that's what I have now. But I'm certainly willing to talk more about that. We're obviously always concerned with juveniles and making sure we get them off those wrong paths before they graduate into violent crimes or things that are going to impact their life or someone else's life for a long time.
Thank you for that, Chief. I know we are coming up on our hour mark, so I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. I also want to mention there are a number of unanswered questions in the chat, so I do want to make sure that the commander will be able to respond to that. You do have his information, and I believe Assistant Chief Bailey is also responding as well. But Commander, any final thoughts before we go?
I certainly appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. It really shows that you are wanting to be an active member in what's going on and addressing some of the issues that we see. I'd like to encourage everyone, as we have our community engagement activities, we typically put those up on Facebook, which is North District IMPD on Facebook, and the same thing on Instagram. That's one way to really know what's going on the district. We put a lot of videos of our officers that are hard at work and how we interact with the community. And so I would encourage you to follow us on those platforms. But I'd just like to say thank you for coming out. I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for being outstanding citizens. And from the officers, we really appreciate every one of you as you send support to our officers. It really does mean a lot. So thank you for tuning in.
Chief, you want to close this out?
Yeah, sure. Commander Wally, excellent job. Thank you so much for you and your staff, and for my staff as well. Assistant Chief Bailey, Alexa, and Shane, you guys are always doing a great job. But folks, I hope this was helpful. We're certainly willing to do this more in the future. Maybe something in person, depending on what we're dealing with COVID. But really do, as the commander said, thank you so much for participating. If we don't hear from you, we don't always know what's going on. And you as a group really did an excellent job in letting us know what you're thinking and concerns you have. So thank you for that. And with that, please have a good and safe night.
Good night, everyone. And again, just a reminder, this entire recording, it will be posted on North District's Facebook page if you need any more of that contact information.